has begun. Debbie, you ready to go?
You'll go ahead and run the poll,
Mute
Jim.
yourself, yeah.
Yeah. What?
Oh, is it time for your poll, or did I do that?
Yes, it's time for my poll.
Okay, everybody gets a poll. There's 4 questions in here. You have to page down to get all the questions. And when you get through with the 4 questions, there's a little submit button at the bottom.
Actually, there's only 3 questions here, so go ahead and answer the 3 and then hit submit. There'll be one at the end.
Okay.
I launched the poll.
You're doing great. We got half the people who have submitted already.
Hey, Jim, while y'all are doing the survey, I saw a question about the slide deck. You know, if these slides will be available later.
Yeah, I believe Debbie said she was going to put them on the website so everybody can download them.
Yep. They should be up as soon as Greg gets back from his trip. He is our website maestro, so he'll put them up in the same location that the all the handouts are in. So you should have gotten an email telling you that the 8 forms that are needed for you to do a district grant were on the website and you could download them.
Okay.
Right. You ready to close?
I have closed and I am sharing the results. So can everybody see it? We got a third of the people, 40% of the people have never been to grants training before. Everybody, a lot of people, 31% have done district grants, and then 50% of the attendants have done both district and global grants. That's pretty good. Most people have done, their clubs have done multiple grants.
Perfect. Thank you, Jim. One of the things that I see there of the 86 people that are on right now, nearly half of you have never attended grants training before. So that will help our presenters with what we focus on in the content. So thank you for that. We've got some goals for today. We want you to understand the basics of how to apply, implement, and close out a district grant and the timeline for that. How you manage a district grant. The stewardship expectations have to do with that you're responsible with the grant and the funds, and we'll talk a bit more about that later, of course. Be able to complete the memorandum of understanding and also the club qualification form, so that after today you will be able to do both of those and then complete your application so that you can receive foundation grant funds and participate in Rotary programs. We do have several great speakers today. I'm doing the overview portion. David Carroll, our district grants chair, is doing the club qualification piece. Beth Stubbs, the immediate past District Rotary Foundation Chair and my mentor, is doing creating a project. And I want to give Beth a shout out too, because she is our Assistant Regional Rotary Foundation Coordinator. Is that not a mouthful? For Zone 30. And I think, Beth, you've got 3 states that you're working with. So the bigger Rotary has recognized as well how great she is. Pat White and Rachel Killebrew will be doing both the last sections. They go hand in hand on applying for grant and project implementation. I will tell you, you're going to think we're kind of rushing through the first 3 parts, but the reason for that is that we want to be sure you have plenty of time with Pat and Rachel on the actual nuts and bolts of applying and implementing. So that's why. We've also built in time for questions at the end of each of the sections. And there's a break in between, and then at the end, there will be one more closing poll. Okay, I'm going to start with the overview. This is the timeline. I'm not going to talk a lot about it because it's going to be talked about later. But what I really want you to pay attention to are these two things. Oops, sorry. Let me go back. I forget. You just barely tap and it goes away. Now's the time to be identifying your project. You may already have one in mind, thought of it last year, and you're ready to go ahead and implement that. So do this now. Be sure that you find your project. And after today, you'll be qualified to do the next steps, which are the Memorandum of Understanding and the Club Qualification Plan. Whenever you get that filled out, and we'll talk more about that, you can submit that anytime, or you can wait and submit it when you turn in your grant application. We will start accepting applications on October 1st, and that will run through January 31st. That point we review. Once they're approved, we'll let you know they're approved by us. Everybody gets their stuff in. We work with the numbers and make sure we've got all our money, if possible, designated. And then we have to send it in to the Rotary Foundation. And it's a kind of a block grant idea, but they'll see every single one of your applications. And you cannot start work until we approve those. We receive the approval from the foundation. And let's see. So once they approve, you get to start, you carry out your project. There's a progress report that's due in October. Your final report has to have receipts. And once we get that final report and approve the receipts, we disperse the funds. Like I said, I know that was really fast, but we're coming back to that later. And I just wanted to give you a great big overview of what happens. So basically, you heard this morning, if you were here, that the global grants have to be in one of the 6 areas of focus now, with the 7th soon to come. District grants don't have to fit that exactly into one of those 7 areas, but they do have to be humanitarian. They can be local or international, as Elaine was mentioning earlier while people were chatting before the meeting began. And the really cool part, I think, is that our donations that our Rotarians give to the annual fund is what comes back to actually fund those district grants 3 years later. So the money that we're going to be spending in 21-22 was raised in 18-19, and that was Jim Roxlow's year. Am I right, Jim?
Yep.
Yep. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like. So what happens is that the annual fund money goes in, and I forgot that this did this. So half of it is district controlled, and there's a district designated fund, and then half of it is controlled by the trustees of the Rotary Foundation, and that money goes into the World Fund. But the really cool part is that World Fund money can also come back to the district too, but that's a whole other story right now. With the district designated fund, we put every penny we can into the district grants, but the Rotary Foundation requires that the most we can put in is 50%. Then the other 50% is saved for global grants, which you learned about this morning. And that's the one that receives that big World Fund match and really helps us with our global grants. So that's the overall picture. Now let's take a look at the precise picture. Well, we'll skip that other. So for 21-22, oops, that looks a little different than I intended it to. But anyway, I'm just going to go click through all of it. So the donations were $611,381 in Jim's year as governor. Isn't that amazing to think that our Rotarians support our foundation to that amount? It just gives me chills every time I think about it. And the reason they do it is so we can do good things. At any rate, so when we take that half, that means that our district designated fund, the money that comes to our district, will be $305,690. And then half of that is what we can spend for district grants. So there's that big 152,845. There's some other little pots of money that come in, but we don't know what they are yet, and it can vary. So this is the basic number we're working with right now. We think it'll be a little bit larger. So are you clear as mud on that? Remember, you'll be able to see the PowerPoint later, and Beth's the money girl, so we'll ask her questions about that later if you need to. Okay, so the whole reason we have a grant management seminar is because we have to tell the Rotary Foundation that we and you will manage their money properly, which comes back to that stewardship thing we'll talk about. So you have to have financial controls. The grant has to be guided by humanitarian and educational principles. It has to meet the needs of the people. Remember, we talked this morning about community assessments. It's not just something that you want to do. It needs to be something that your beneficiaries need and want. And also, again, that it safeguards those donor funds. I asked Beth if she would do this, but she said I had to try it. So with stewardship, again, that's that responsible management and oversight. So we can't just turn it over to somebody else and let them do it. We have to supervise the project ourselves. We have to use those commonly accepted business practices so that, you know, just the regular old CPA accounting stuff that businesses are supposed to use. If there are any irregularities, we have to promptly report them to the foundation. And if a project is approved, you have to do what you say you're going to do. And if you want to do something else, you have to contact us, and then we have to go through an approval process to make that, that implementation change. The financial records are reviewed. As I mentioned in the timeline, we ask you for receipts. You have to have copies of canceled checks. We have to show the Rotary Foundation that we are indeed being good stewards of their money and that we turn our reports in on time. Just like with any business or nonprofit, that's important as well. Okay. When you qualify, it's for 1 year. Clubs have to requalify every year. Now, I know many of you have been to other qualifications, although I was so excited, 42% of you are brand new this year. But it is important because we have to review the principles and new things come down the pike that we need to tell you about. It's also important to remember that the club is responsible for the use of the funds. It's not just the PE and the person who signs the application. The whole club is also responsible. If you were on the morning grant, Jim talked about potential conflicts of interest have to be disclosed. It's not that that's going to cause any issues to you. And as he said this morning, we all have them. We just have to know, we have to let people know that we're aware of them and we're watching out for them. If we have an audit of the Rotary Foundation, or if the audit committee for our district foundation wants to look at your receipts or talk to you, then you are required to cooperate with that. And again, as always, we use the money properly. I can't imagine that any Rotarian in this district would try to take that money, and we're not saying that, but by safeguarding and stewarding, then we ensure that there's never any question about that. Okay, the first part is done, and I think I'm on time. David, you're up.
Debbie, do you want to take a question from the chat or not?
If there are questions, we can do them. I will say that everything that I talked about will be talked about in further detail as we go through the rest. So I was saving the question time for later.
Okay.
But if you see something that wouldn't fall into those, then yes, let's take the question now.
Okay. We have a question, just how do you decide whether it should be a global or a district grant? Is it the amount of money needed?
Okay. Beth, I'm going to let you answer that one.
Yes, there are several things that you could say about that. A local project, more than likely, would be a district grant. But you could have an international project, and it could be, you know, a small amount of money or up to potentially a $10,000 project. But if you were going to have a global project, it would need to be $30,000. That's the minimum for that arrangement. So that's how you would decide. And the global has to be international. You have to have clubs also in the host country. And so, and it has to be in the 6 areas of focus. She went over that at the beginning. But the district grant does not have to be in the area of focus. She mentioned that as well. So I think that probably gets that question unless someone wants to add something.
Any other questions for now, Beth?
No, that's it.
Okay, David. Maybe.
There we go. And Debbie, are you taking care of the?
Doing the PowerPoint. Yeah. I'll
Okay,
take
thank
care
you.
of it.
Okay. Go right ahead. Okay. And it's great to see everybody here. I feel like I'm like everybody else. I miss seeing everybody in person. And sometimes these seminars is really where we get to see each other in person, but hopefully soon. But the qualification process, like Debbie mentioned, is a requirement by the Rotary Foundation. They want to know that we're spending the donated funds properly, that people have donated, and showing the great stewardship of people that have entrusted us with the money. So attending this seminar today, you being online, is the first step because you have to have attendance. So we would like to have at least 2 club members, and I hope that you can have just as many as you want that would be online. We have another session that'll be in October, and encourage members to attend if they want to understand a little bit more about it. But one of those being 2 club members, one of those being the president-elect. So if you were to go online, you would see the different forms on the district website, and one of those being the Club Memorandum of Understanding, and that is on the same, at the same place as we would the Club Qualification Plan that our district, that's one of our forms, and they're both there in the same area. We ask each club, like Debbie said, if you're planning on doing a grant, or if you just want to go ahead and get qualified, your club qualified. If you don't have a project to submit in January, but you're thinking about doing something a little later, go ahead and get your qualification in, because we have clubs all the time that'll come up and they'll say, we haven't submitted the club memorandum of understanding, but we found a project that we want to do a little later. So I would go ahead and get your club qualified. When you get the forms completed, send them into, it's got the information on where to send them, and we approve it. We keep a spreadsheet of all approved clubs and clubs that have met the requirements. And Beth will or Debbie will call if there's a global grant, or Jim, and they'll say, has this club been qualified? And we have to make sure that when they sign off on all that documentation, that the clubs have met the requirements. Okay? As Debbie mentioned, every club that is going to be involved in a grant has to be qualified annually. So just because you were qualified the previous year doesn't mean that you're going to be qualified for this upcoming year. So you attend, and then you turn in your qualification information, and we'll keep those on a spreadsheet and help you if you have any questions. But find out, a lot of clubs, it's kind of become a who took care of the qualification plan and everything last year. So I would understand that. Do you understand what you wrote last year? Did it work? And update that and find out who has already been working on it. And was it good enough for the year was it good enough for what you did for the previous year? And do you need to update that and make some changes? So you can modify that and resubmit the qualification plan. But what I want to warn you about, so many times you let clubs let one person fill out the paperwork, and maybe it's not reviewed and it's not updated, maybe with a committee. And I would say anybody that's going to be involved in the project needs to understand what's been signed off on with the qualification plan and all the financial responsibility. So you sign the new memorandum of understanding and send it to us, and then we'll review it and help you with it if we have any questions, and then we will put you in as approved if you've approved your paperwork.
Okay.
Okay. There's a great document on the website on the district website that I think would really help you if you've never filled out one of these forms before. And it's a guide. And I would say it talks about each line that you have to fill out, and it gives you some examples. And I think it's a great guide to help you if you've never done this club memorandum of understanding. So you fully implement the steward. It's all about stewardship and the management of good management practices. I would use the practices that you have in your own business or in your own. Use these funds. You're agreeing to use these funds and take the responsibility like you would your own funds, and using basic accounting principles. I would appoint a club member or a committee. Definitely you have to appoint a club member or a committee to manage the club qualification and get more people involved so they'll understand the process. Think about some of the people that in your club that are responsible. Would you want to put a member on that committee that maybe their attendance is not good or they're always here and there? Put people that are stable and that people that can monitor your projects and make sure that everything has been taken care of. Okay. These are some questions that I think that you would want to ask when you're reviewing and filling out and meeting with a committee. What MOU requirements does your club already implement? You know, a good person to think about to be involved in this would be your treasurer, because a lot of this is how you're handling the money. So that person is already setting up requirements for checking accounts, and they're working with the club funds. And what requirements does your club need to implement? You know, you'll see that it talks about setting up separate checking accounts for your grants. It talks about hopefully that you have 2 people signing on your checking accounts already, so that's good accountability. And what type of members do you think would be good choices? And like we said, club secretaries, club treasurers, people that deal with funds and understand what needs to be done for accountability. Okay, so once you get into the club qualification plan, these are some good principles that I think, just some good practices. Management, just managing, reading over and make sure that everything is being done properly. This is a big one, conflicts of interest. I heard somebody mention that, I think it was Elaine earlier. If you think that you're going to have a conflict of interest with club members being involved in the project, this happens all the time. For us as Rotarians, we're involved in so many different things. Does that mean you can't participate in the project? No. It means that you can't handle the funds, you can't be involved in some of those decision-making, those decisions. And so as long as you keep yourself out of those conflicts of interest, and if you have some potentials, you need to note those and you need to practice on how to deal with those. Training, train your committees on what to do and what not to do. Bank accounts, we've already talked about that. Set up separate bank accounts for your grants. I was talking about this to Beth a little earlier, and she understands this process, being a CPA, on answering some of those questions. But you know, a lot of clubs have grant accounts, and then they work out of that. But it's all about not commingling your money for grants with your club operating expenses. We talked about financial management and just use good principles. Document retention. This is something that we really need to focus on, because we see it every day. We keep all the documents, we keep copies of what you send in to us, but we want to make sure that you keep good documents there in case we ever have an audit or a question. And so far we've been really think we do a great job with retention, but set up a plan on how your club is going to retain and store your documents, and who's going to keep them, and have them one place that people would work from and keep those documents. The same thing with reports. Make sure your reports are on time. Misuse plan. What's going to happen if you have a question and you think the money is being misused. Now, Beth and I talked a little bit about that. We've discussed that before. You know, what you think is misuse of funds or misuse of the plan might be different. It might be something very simple that you can just document and put something on file. If you're paying back a Rotarian to reimburse them for helping with a project and you're reimbursing them, document why, what, and make sure you've got good documentation on those documents and keep those and retain those in your club records. Best practices, get everything done, review them off and on through the year, and be sure and get approval before you do any grant work at all, because you have to have approval. That's a requirement by the Rotary Foundation. I know all that was quick and you might have some specific questions, but be glad to answer them.
Beth, do we have questions for David?
There were a few in the chat and I answered them as we went along. So I think we're good.
Good. If you have any questions, call us. We'll be glad to help you, or email us.
I referred them to the website. They were asking about where the MOU and the club qualification information was. And so, and then Don Hobbs chimed in here and gave him the precise link. So thank you, Don.
Great. One question we did have that I saw was about examples of qualification plans and MOUs. Do we have any of those on the website? Is that something we've thought about?
We have had some of the, I think we've had some in the past. I think those examples that are on there, the guidelines, there's some, they show some examples, and I'll go back and double check that, but I believe that those guidelines have some examples in there showing what needs to be put in those spaces. But I'll double check them to make sure. I know Jim had a document in the early, when we first started this, and Jim, maybe we need to make sure and see if that's, maybe we need to update that a little bit, but it was a real nice example of how to answer some of the questions on the club level.
Yeah, I think going back and looking at that and refreshing it might be a good thing to do.
Okay.
Perfect.
David,
Thank you, David.
There's one more question.
Sure.
Does money get reimbursed before the project is completed or at the end?
It gets reimbursed at the end. At the end, you send us, you finish your project and you send us your receipts. We'll make sure and go over those receipts and make sure that they are all within the time frame of the grant, and we will approve that, and then we will approve your final report. And I'm sure that there's maybe some questions we'll need to verify, and we'll go over those pretty good because we're responsible for those. And then we will request a check and send it back to you and your club.
David, they asked if there are any successful grant applications online so they don't have to start from scratch. And there are, aren't there?
There are, yes.
Okay, that's all the questions we have right now.
Good.
I want to stress, and I think that Pat and Rachel will be stressing this again as well, but especially for those of you who are new to this, while you are reimbursed a certain amount from district funds, what you have to do is have enough money in your treasury to cover all the expenses so that you can pay them, turn the receipts in, and then be reimbursed after the fact. So sometimes that limits the size of grants that clubs may reach out for. There was a question in the chat also that Beth answered in the chat about multi-club grants, and you'll hear more about those later, but we encourage them.
Debbie, one thing, and I know we need to move on, but I wanted to reemphasize, we have this question every year. If there's a multi-club project, every club that's involved in the project has to be qualified. So it's not just the league club, it's every club that's involved in that project. And did I see a question pop up about the funding? How much did the clubs have to invest? Did I see that?
Is there a minimum they've asked?
Okay. Beth, would you like to answer that? Because I know we've had that happen. We're with club funds. I thought that's what, is that what they're asking?
They're asking, is there a minimum that they must contribute to receive a district grant? So It says club funds. Don't you have a minimum of 500?
500, yes. $500, but I was reading that wrong. I was thinking that the question was, how much did they have to match? So if your grant's $5,000, then your club has to at least match $5,000 with club funds, money that was donated by Rotarians, not someone else out of Rotary. It has to be funds that were donated through the club or Rotarians.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, Beth, you're up. Creating a project.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and glad to see all of you here. And so these will be our objectives for this part of the program. And I hope that you will think about, as we go along, what you might do for your project next year. So, what is a successful project? I don't know whether we actually go through the way that you would need to find that out. When we do our projects, typically we do the work, receive our funding, and go on our merry way. But as some of the things that have been mentioned in the training thus far should resonate with you. And one of those things is, did we have an impact on the community? And did we meet the beneficiary's needs? And if you're not familiar with that beneficiary term, you need to become, it needs to be on your mind. Who are we helping? And how are we helping them? And so implementing plans that have goals and outcomes will be a way for you to know whether you are achieving success. And you want it to be sustainable beyond the life of the grant. What does that mean? That means that once you lock the door and give them the key to whatever the project is, that there is some mechanism, some way, some club that is going to make sure that that particular investment that we've made with grant money is going to be able to be sustained. It will be there in the future. They don't have to last forever, but it would be good if they lasted multiple years. And so practicing proper stewardship, Debbie went over that beautifully. But the real purpose of that is that people in our Rotary clubs are giving this money blindly for us to use in the grant world. And so if we don't take good care of that money, guess what? They might stop giving it to us. So it's very important as we go along through the cycle of giving grant money and using grant money that we do that properly. So if you think we're being a pain because we ask you for the receipts or the canceled checks, or we want to be able to say that we did all that we could to make sure everything was properly spent. So I hope you understand that. All right, so how do we know what is needed for our project? You know, that's something that comes up quite frequently. As I've gone to clubs and talked with them, they'll say, what can we do for a project? So I would encourage them, as I would encourage you, to maybe talk with the members of your community, the local officials. If you don't have a project in mind, ask them what is needed, because you want to meet those needs of what could happen in your area. And then you have to look around for what are your resources within your club that will allow you to perform whatever project is suggested. And so you have to choose a project that's based on needs, not just what you want to do. You know, people have great ideas and no way to foster them. So it's best to find out what's needed rather than just going on with what the great ideas are. So who could your partners be in this endeavor? And this could be a lot of different people. This could be local governments. This could be libraries, schools, other NGOs, other Rotary clubs, other civic organizations. You could have a lot of partners, and some of you know who are on this call that if you have a partner, such as the state of Tennessee, for a road sign that welcomes people to your community, that it may take a while. I see John Downs giving me the thumbs up. We've had others, John, not just Sparta, but you have to, sometimes those partners have to be notified before you can achieve your project, and they have to give their permission. So you need to think about who those partners might be. Also, how do you plan this project? Let's say you went to the local officials and you asked them what was needed, and you found out who your partners were, and then you decide you need to plan. And Rachel Killebrew would say, planning is the best thing you can do. And that means to write everything down that you want to accomplish before you ever try to pick up those forms off the website. Say what our timeline is, who will be involved, what are our goals, what are we trying to achieve. Worry about all of that. It's a very similar approach to what Jim said in the global grant training this morning. Find out what needs to be done, who will be involved, how much money, resources we have, create a budget, and then worry about the application and implementation. And always have a contingency plan. We know there's so many things that happen in Rotary. People transfer. One of the key persons on your committee gets a transfer somewhere and your committee falls apart. So you always need to have a contingency plan, have good communication, so that if something does fall apart, you'll be right there to pick up the pieces. So, and at the end, I would just say about the budget. It's important that you have your funds lined up, I think, before you decide to do a project. I just think it would be a tragedy if you got your grant application approved and then you didn't have funds. So be realistic and have funds available. And also see if you can get it done for a good price. Competitive bidding is very important. And if your project is fairly large, you'll need to check that. And that's one of the ways you can do away with the conflict of interest is through competitive bidding. Because maybe your Rotarian is going to give you the best price, but you've got to get the prices from other people. Make sure your prices are reasonable. Sometimes we see on grant applications that they have relied on other people to do their ordering for them. That's a little bit, out there. You need to check and make sure if you're going to ask the school to provide you a list of things that are going to go into your project, you need to make sure that that list of prices is good. And then Debbie, you went crazy on me there.
Sorry. Sorry.
So disclose potential conflicts of interest, and if you have real conflicts of interest, they can be dealt with. You can be helped with that by David and his committee. So I guess I'm out of time, and do I have any questions? If there's one here,
you can answer this one that I've been answering them on the chat. The one that I'm looking at right now is someone asked about outside funding, and if outside funding sources can have their name mentioned in the project, is that okay?
Okay, named in the project. I'm not sure exactly what that means. The club, you have to understand that the grant funds are matching club funds. So if you get some outside funding, they need to have given it to the club. You can't have, let's just say you're doing a district grant for $9,000. You can't say $3,000 from the club, $1,500 from United Way, and $4,500 for district grant, because district grant money cannot match the United Way money. So you have to get that money given to your club somehow for grant funds to match it. I think that answers that question.
Yeah, let me look at it. let's say, for example, Bill and Melinda Gates called up and said, I heard about your project. I want to give you $2,000, right? And so if they sent that to your club and said, it's for something like this project. So you take the money and then you use it and you can get it matched because it came through your club. And then in publicity, you could say, yes, our club did this project with help from the Rotary Foundation and with help from Bill and Melinda Gates. You could say that, but the money came through your club and then got matched by the district grant.
Okay.
Is that okay, Beth?
Yes, she went on to say, I was thinking if it was something like a park project, would their name be on the park too? And David, I can't remember what that rule is. Will you tell us?
Yeah, I mean, you can do that just because it's the right thing for the park. If you you can have all kinds of names on a sign at a park.
Yeah.
You see lots of people who contributed, so.
And there was a question, can a club have multiple district grants in the same year? And Jim answered that, yes, if it can handle them and there's money available. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Doing great.
Any other questions for Beth? Great. Well, you guys will be happy to know we're a little bit ahead of schedule and it's time for the break. So what we're doing is a little different though. We're going to say it's 15 after, and you will have 15 minutes for your break, but you will also be in a breakout room. Jim, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about how you're going to do that. And here is the question for you to talk about with your fellow Rotarians.
Okay, so there are 6 breakout rooms, and how long did you say this was, Debbie?
15 minutes.
Okay, so I got to make sure I get this right as we put it together. 15 minutes, and you'll get a little warning. And when you're together, talk about what's the most important thing you've learned so far. And when you come back, there'll be 6 groups, and each of you have somebody who's your spokesman and says what you thought was most important. Is that okay? Okay, when I push the button, everybody's going to have a little message comes up that asks you to join your breakout room. Okay, have fun.
Jim?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think we'll type those in chat, the breakout room, most important thing,
Okay.
just so we can stay on target. And I want to be sure and give Pat and Rachel plenty of time.
Okay. Yeah, you were about 7 minutes ahead,
And then we
I
can
think,
share.
as
Yeah.
Beth finished. So that's
Right.
pretty good.
We've been doing good.
You got to break that right?
Most people did join. I see in the breakout list, there's a couple people who didn't join, which means maybe they weren't listening when we started, or they had to go take their bio break first, and then they'll come back and join. Debbie, you
And we
didn't.
forgot to mention that break was well, we did say break and break out. So we'll see how it goes.
I think they can figure that part out.
I think they can do it. And in fact, I'm going to go do that. I'll be back shortly.
Yeah, me too.
Jim, I was really excited to see, I think 92 people.
Yeah,
And Bobby says to remind you that we're sharing the computer, so he's listening too. So really, we have 93.
that may be happening somewhere else too. Yeah, I meant to, I had my timer set, so I was gonna take attendance again right before the breakout, but I didn't get, we actually were a little ahead, so I didn't do it. So I'll do it as soon as we get back.
The cool part is you lost nobody this morning, basically. And in fact, people joined in throughout. So you started about 5 or 6 less than you ended up with.
Yeah, and you're up a little bit from the beginning, up 4 or 5 from where we started.
Is the pro license limited? I was a little worried about the 100 limit, but
There is a 100 limit. You are right. I hadn't thought about it because I didn't imagine we were going to get there. But you could say we're close now. It could happen, certainly. Although when we redo it in October, I imagine we'll have less because most people did it this time.
sure. That just happened to occur to me. And then I was like, oh no, we don't want anybody locked out.
Yeah, that would have surprised me because I wasn't anticipating worrying about it.
Mm-mm.
Still got 9 minutes to go.
Yay. Did those attendance sheets I sent you help?
Yeah, I used one of them. I printed one out and I went through and tried to get everybody as they were coming on. I don't think I can do it again, but I'll use the screenshots
Yeah.
to try and confirm. And as long
I'm
as
really
we
curious how
keep
many
good
clubs
attendance,
we have.
I don't think we really need to worry about anybody dropping out early or something like that.
Right. We had 41 clubs with yours, so.
Okay.
I'll go in and add the new people and send it to you later so you'll know who they are. We added Gatlinburg and Hartsville and Fairfield Glade.
Okay. And the only 2 people who didn't join their
And
breakout.
regular Crossville.
What's that? Am I muted?
And regular Crossville this morning to the
Oh, okay.
regular Crossville was up. So we had 3 clubs who had attendees who were not pre-registered.
Okay, we got somebody named Chris Peterson who wasn't registered and didn't join his breakout group. But he was there when we split it up. Do you know who that is? He or she? Do you know a Chris Peterson?
Crossville.
Crossville?
He was actually only signed up for pets. So I'm not,
Well, he
I'm
had
looking at
the,
the master.
he had the link, so he certainly could have joined. But anyway, he
Sure.
didn't, maybe he came on and listened a little bit and then disappeared, but he was here when we started the breakouts because that's when I split everybody up.
Well, he may have had something he had to do.
Yeah. And then somebody named Kelly, Kelley, with just one name.
I think I've got one.
Here we go. Kelly McNeil, Cookeville Sunset. And so that person is probably a she, was,
She is a she.
okay. I didn't catch her at the beginning, but she was here at the breakout again. So he's probably here.
She. After they share the questions in chat, I think we'll still be about 5 minutes ahead.
Mhm. And Kelly's with us. Is that Kelly McNeil? Nope, she's not there.
Looks like we're all caught up on chat. Yay.
Yeah,
Ooh, I could, if I attach the PowerPoint to where it says file, do you think that they can get it now
I don't know.
once they get back?
Try it. Where does it say file?
Over on the side, when you've got somebody pulled up there, like we're in the chat box.
Oh. Oh, I see, a little file thing, yeah. So you could,
I might have to stop the PowerPoint to do it. Darn it. Do you have it, Jim? I sent it to you this morning. Maybe you can put it up.
so if I look, yeah, it does take me to my computer. So I would have to save it on my computer and then I could find it and put it there.
It's in an email. Yeah,
Yeah, let me see if I can find it. We still got a minute.
that'd be cool. I can't do it without taking the PowerPoint down, and I don't want to jinx it at this point.
Okay, revised slide deck for today. That's it, right?
Says final
Yeah.
in the name. I have such a sophisticated naming system for revisions, but that is final. Do the little dings mean they're coming back?
No, that's me trying to.
Ah.
get your file in a place where I can find it. Okay, now let's come back here. It's a race against time.
I was just thinking that. You know, all kinds of people are coming back.
And also remember, it can be a small grant. It doesn't.
I can't find it for some reason, Debbie.
Okay, we'll do it later. Let's bring everybody back.
Okay.
We're back.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi, Jim.
Back.
Hello.
Hello.
Ooh, I'm happy. Emily Rice said that she loved the breakout session. Thank you, Emily.
That's great, Emily. You got to tell us what you loved about it.
And we would like all of you, whoever your lead is, if you would type in your choice in the chat box, and we'll share with everyone.
What are we doing?
Yeah. If a group has decided what's the most important thing, put it in the chat box.
Oh, you just want one thing.
Oh, go ahead, cheat.
You can put as many as you want to.
I have a question. Do you want us on mute or not?
In general, yes.
Yes, be on mute.
Yes, please be on mute.
Okay.
Otherwise, we get some background noise and it's just easier. All right, breakout group 1. In order to apply for a district grant, we have to have the funds in our club funds. Keith, please add your findings. All right, John Downs, project timing and record keeping are key. Karen says, we had some open questions. And Aaron, timing is everything. Best group, matching concept, documentation and finance, joining with other clubs. Mark Presley's group said, do what you say that you are going to do, and you can't start until you're approved. And here's a question from Breakout Group 1. And then also another group said they learned why they need to do training. Okay, the question from Breakout Group 1 was, can a club apply for a district grant year after year to do a similar project? Let's see. David, are you back?
There can be different phases for the project.
Right, and that's what we'd like to do. We hope that people will at least try to improve the project or expand the project instead of putting it. We don't want clubs putting the same project in their budget every year and expecting it to be funded. We would like for you to try to do something different, think out of the box. Maybe I think about Chattanooga Breakfast they do a lot of work with one of the schools in Chattanooga. So every year they kind of come up, or every couple of years, a different kind of project that they want to do at that school. So I think that's kind of what I'm thinking, is do something that kind of expand it. You can use the same type of program or the same type of project, but make it different and try to better the project is what I would suggest.
Thank you, David. Another group were really happy about the timeline and the pre-planning, learning about that, and that you have to have additional funds from other sources to go into the club first, that it doesn't have to be in the 7 areas of focus, the district website some people weren't aware of, conflict of interest. And then we have another question. Are extensions possible if a project is delayed, David?
We cannot what happens is if you're delayed, then you jeopardize all the projects because we have to have them, all the reports for all projects turned in to the Rotary Foundation to be able to receive next year's funds for the next year. So we can't have two grants open at the same time. So what we usually will work on with you, if something happens and your project's delayed, we'll encourage you to, instead of holding up that grant, to let us try to work with you on reapplying it for the next year, or we'll work with you if we can at all possible. We've had several projects this year that said they couldn't get finished. They thought they were going to be delayed, and then at the very last minute they came back together and we still were able to fund them in the present year. So that's going to happen some, but we can't hold up a project. I mean, all the grants, the total report, and hold it open for one grant if we need to open it up, receive funds for the next year. I hope that answered it.
Thank you. I hope you all found the breakout room a good experience for you and getting to chat a little bit with your fellow Rotarians, even if you couldn't do it face to face. So thank you. I do have one more comment about Zoom can be pretty effective for training after all. Thank you for that.
Yep. Surprise, surprise.
Sometimes we get forced into things and then we find out they're really not so bad after all. At least that's the way those of us who are working with it and presenting training feel. Let's move on. We're still a couple of minutes ahead. I'm proud of us to applying for a district grant. And our two people for this section are going to be Pat White, who is the district grant coordinator for the 21-22 grants. And she will be the person that you submit your grants to, that you will receive communications from about when the grant is approved, when you can start work, those kinds of things. She will also be in charge of the grant readers who review your grants and make sure to work with you so that your application is approved. They may come back with you and have some questions. You just work with them and it will work super. Rachel Killebrew she's known in our district as our grant writer extraordinaire. So she's on as well for the next two sections, and she'll be particularly useful to us in the questions part. So without further ado, again, Pat.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. A lot of this will probably be repetitive, and for those who have attended 6 or more, bear with us because we have 42%. This is their first time. I hope you all have the link for the various forms. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but everything is on the website. The district website is your friend. First of all, I'd just like to review a few of the instructions. I've said repeatedly that the grants are the heart of Rotary and very dear to my heart. You all know now that the applications will be accepted from October, which is only 2 weeks away, through January 31st. And please get them in on time. And remember that you must have your MOU and club qualification either with the application or get it in ahead of time if you can at all possible. We've gone over how much is available. That will depend on how many grants that we have. Minimum 500. Now, if you're doing a single grant, there is a separate form, and a multiple grant, a separate form. I would like very much if there is one contact, and in the information on your contacts, make sure that it is complete. Because we go to contact someone and their email may have changed or the person may have changed, and make sure that the people that you have as contacts actually know that they are going to be responsible. We've had occasions where someone didn't even know that they were responsible, and they actually were. So make sure that you communicate that properly with those that you have on the form.
Pat, is there a certain slide that you'd like me on right now?
Pardon me? Say again?
Is there a certain slide that you would like me on right now?
You're good right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to talk about the reports a little bit later on. You can go to the next slide now. Again, just go over the timeline. Once we receive the application, I will contact you immediately to say that we have received it, and it will be sent to one of the reviewers. We have a team of reviewers, and we'll get back to you just as quickly as possible with any questions that we might have. The earlier you submit the application, the better, the sooner that you'll receive the funds down the road. And remember, you cannot expend any money until after we receive final approval and you have been assigned an application number. I'm sorry if I'm jumping back and forth. A lot of this is repetitive. There is a district grant checklist, and make sure that you follow that once you have your form completed. I'm going to go right to the form if any of you have that in front of you. The first section is, you can go to there we go, thank you. The sponsor, that is you as the primary club, the lead club. And the requested funds. Remember, the club funds must exceed or match the requested funds. Other funds. Sometimes you won't find out until later on in the project that you will be receiving other funds, but it's best to have all of your funding up front, as has been mentioned before. Now, the project description. Obviously, you have to give a name to it. 2 to 4 words is primarily what we need. It has to meet a humanitarian need, and you've got the areas of focus. If you can bring that slide up just for a second, the areas of focus. You might be interested to know that last year, 1920, we had 48 grants, and 7 of those were peace building and conflict prevention. 8 were disease prevention and treatment. 3 water and sanitation. All of those were other countries. 1 youth exchange, 15 basic education and literacy, 13 economic and community development, and 1 was a food project. And we gave out about $194,000. So that was a very good grant year. Okay, we can go back to the who, what, where, when, why, how, and how much. The project description. And I'm sorry, Debbie. Describe in the best way that you possibly can who is going to benefit from the project. We don't need 50 pages of statistics as to why a certain project is needed, but we do need the salient points of how many people are going to be affected and the reason the community needs the project, who the target audience is, or who the target beneficiaries are, I should say, and what you expect will be the outcome and the impact it will have on the community. That's very important. It's just like reading a novel. You want to know all the details. The people reading the grant don't know your particular area, so you have to make it very clear what it's going to be about. Financial control, the budget. And I will say from the very beginning that it is good to keep track of your receipts as you go. Don't wait until the project is completely done and then try to gather all of your receipts and cancel checks and everything. Sustainability, Beth talked about sustainability. Is your club going to be responsible for any future expenses, or is it going to be self-sustaining? That's important for us to know. It should be self-sustaining. Unless, as we mentioned before, it's going to be a several phase project. The budget, in the section on the funds, the number of funds, the amount of funds that you have has to match what is on the budget. Detailed. Set up, my suggestion is to set up an Excel spreadsheet early on and set up your categories. You might have some project that is going to have equipment and supplies. You're going to have advertising expenses or media related expenses. So set up those categories, and then with an Excel spreadsheet, you can work it around and change if you need to, but make sure that your categories match what you have requested in the funds. Reports and authorization. We'll talk about the reports a little bit more later, except that a progress report is due October 1st and a final report within 2 months of the project's completion, but no later than May 31st. As David said, we have to have those in, otherwise it may jeopardize the rest of the reports. Projects, I'm sorry. Certification, the president or the president-elect has to sign. We do need a signature, not a hand stamp. We do need a signature so that we know that the president or president-elect knows what is going on. Now that's just a very, very quick overview of what the form is. And of course, on the multiple club grant, the district governor has to sign off on that as well. As we said before, plan your project. Planning is very important. And you plan to satisfy a particular need in the community, something that you can actually accomplish, and something that is really needed in the community. I wouldn't be surprised to see a number of COVID-19 related projects this year. And involve your partners. It's not fair to the club and to the person that is the contact for that to be the sole person that's involved. The idea is to get as many people involved as possible. And the more you do, the better it is. And once you have your applications ready to go, have someone else read it so that it makes sense to them before you even submit it for review. Answer your questions and ask others to ask and answer them. As I said before, the forms are on the district website. The instructions is very clear and you should not have any problems, but please don't hesitate to call or to email me, or if I can't answer it, I'll ask David, and if he can't answer it, he'll ask Debbie or Beth. So like I said, I've quickly gone over this, but hope that at least gives you the highlights.
Thank you, Pat. We are going to go to questions in just a minute, but I'd like to ask Rachel to jump in here if you would, and tell us if there are any helpful hints and best practices that you would recommend for clubs in writing their district application.
Well, I think in selecting a project to begin with, I think it's really good if you find one that you're really passionate about for some reason or another in your club, and you get more involvement that way. And then also for as many people in your club to be involved in some way in the project, and not just have a few people doing the whole thing also is good. And picking a project that everyone is passionate about is important. And I'd like to use our McMinnville Noon Rotary. Last year, they selected, many years ago, they had installed a track for the town, for the schools, and it had gotten in bad condition. And the schools teams were having to go elsewhere to participate in tracks. So they selected that, and it was just wonderful to see how the whole town got involved and is helping with it. So I commend them on that. That's a good example of picking a good project, getting everyone involved, not only in your club, but in your town, is really good. So.
Thank you, Rachel. Okay, we've already done the 7 areas of focus, the last one being the environment that will come into effect next year. All right, questions. If you'll ask with the chat feature, Beth or Jim will relay those to Rachel and Pat, and we'll see what we can find out beyond what we've already talked about.
I might like to add that one because we've had that before about the tornado relief and floods and things. I've seen several different ones of the areas of focus used. Like, for instance, if it's floods and it has polluted your water system, disease prevention and treatment might be the one you select. Water and sanitation could also be selected for those. Maternal and child health also applies because children sometimes are not able to go to school. Their schools have been flooded, and so their health is at risk. Basic education and literacy. Right now, a lot of people cannot go to schools, and I would not be surprised if a lot of our COVID grants that come in don't affect almost all of these. Economic and community development, the COVID has affected everybody for that. So, and even peace and conflict resolution may come into play. We've had a lot of very upset people. So almost all of those will apply, I have a feeling, with the grants that we'll see coming in.
We have a question from Mark Presley about what are some things that have been done to help people that are homeless, and would helping homeless be considered for a grant?
I think something specific would be, I mean, and I was going to answer this about the disaster relief or whatever. I think as long as you have a specific project that meets a certain need, and we have to be careful that we don't donate funds to a certain organization or we get involved in something that's so general. I think we have to find a specific need about it. And I don't know, I was just trying to think if I knew of many projects that involved homeless, and I don't remember, other than we've done some habitat projects and stuff like that, but I don't remember a lot of homeless.
David, the South Campbell County had the project for putting mattresses in people's homes who were sleeping on the floor. You remember that one?
Yeah, that's for this year. So yes, Heavenly, it's called Heavenly something, Heavenly Sleep, or is it had a catchy name with it?
Something like that.
That's it. That's it.
What was the category?
Sleep in Heavenly Peace is the name of it.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Debbie.
There's Debbie. I'm glad you're online, Debbie. I thought that was just a great project. It is a great project. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did that fall into one of the areas of focus?
I don't remember. Maybe it was economic and community development. I don't remember.
I don't remember that either, Karen.
It really is a stretch relative to the way the focus areas are focused, right? So we're trying hard to put it in one of the areas, and it may be related, but it's okay to have a humanitarian project that's not strictly in one of the focus areas. If it's important for your community and the club wants to do it, then you don't really have to worry about which area. And certainly we do disaster relief grants, and the Rotary Foundation supports them, but they don't say those disaster relief grants are fitting into one of the focus areas.
Right.
Excellent point. There's also a question about when you get to the implementation phase, can you adjust where you spend your money as long as you remain within the total project costs?
I think so. If you, excuse me, if you have, all projects will change. I mean, not all, but there'll be a lot of changes. And if you have some changes in your project, and for example, a lot of times you'll get involved in a project and another organization or somebody else will say, I'd like to sponsor this part of your project, but then you'll have some funds left over. You can apply those to the project. You just need to let the committee know and talk to them a little bit about it. And especially when you're sending in a progress report, put some changes in there and what's going on with your project. That's a good opportunity right there to let us know if your project is changing any at all.
There's some other questions here. Do brick and mortar projects qualify for district grant, i.e. contribution to a community sponsored building project? David?
That gets, some of that gets a little questionable, but yes, you can use some for some remodeling. We've done projects. I just give some examples right now. I'd have to know what the project is to really, maybe just sometimes we'll have a project that we question and we send it to the Rotary Foundation and let them approve it if we questioned it. But a lot of clubs have done some remodeling of some rooms or, Beth, can you think of anything else that I'm not thinking about? I was trying to remember some of the projects that we've done. Maybe a person's home that needed some updating to it, that had some there was a project that one of the clubs had that were helping a family. It had some handicapped members of their family, and
They built them a ramp.
They were building a ramp, and we didn't think it would qualify, and we sent it to the Rotary Foundation. They loved the project. So, so we'll test the water a lot of times and send it for their approval.
Yeah, there's a kind of a blanket prohibition against building new buildings. And so if that's what you're thinking about, it's probably not going to be okay. But if you're somehow adding to something that's already there or helping to modify something, then quite often it's okay.
Jim, we did the reading room at Dalewood Elementary School, and that was great.
Yeah,
that was a good.
You probably didn't
example.
build a building, right?
Right. No, we modified a library.
Yeah, and so if you go in and you do a little bit of partitions, we've done things like partition kinds of things, boys and girls clubs, some places. They're doing not major renovations, but some things that you would say are kind of construction.
I guess the biggest thing, that maybe we haven't said today is that, we can't grant project funds just funding. And so, it has to be a service project. So if someone says, well, so-and-so says if we can match their money, Bob, they can, do a much bigger project. The Rotarians have to be involved. And I don't think we've said that today.
We haven't said much about involvement, and that's such a big part of these grants.
And we did have a had a question that was similar to that about whether you could donate money to community organizations. So remember, you've got to have that Rotarian involvement. We also have a question about would funds for an academic club at a rural school qualify?
What kind of
Funds for an academic club. I mean, I would have to know
Depends
more
on
about
what an
that.
academic club
What
is.
they're going to be used for.
Yeah, I think I would have to see something a little bit more specific to be able to answer that.
It would actually be robotics.
Oh, yeah, we had a.
Yeah, you can do that.
We had a grant for building those things that fly around. What were those, David?
Drones.
Drones.
And in Chattanooga, we've had grants for electric race cars. You know, it's basically a STEM project, and an elementary school builds and drives a little electric go-kart.
Okay.
I think that was Franklin AM that did the drones, wasn't it, David?
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
same one looking at the robotics.
Okay.
I believe that.
Great.
Go ahead.
Super project. I want to mention that Janice Mitchell caught a typo on the information and instructions document. So when do we apply? Pay attention to those dates on the first page between October 1st, 2020 and January 31st, 2021. The dates on the second page at the very bottom of the application will be corrected in the forms that are on the web. My husband helped me with that. And he was sitting here saying, "Arg, I can't believe I missed that." Anyway, go by the October 1st, 2020 to January 31st, 2021 on the first page. And what it says on the second page will be corrected. Apologies. Okay, I think it's time to move on. And you have the pleasure of listening to Pat and Rachel talk about project implementation now. Take it away, ladies.
Okay, I did want to mention, I believe that the grant eligibility guidelines are still on the website. Am I coming through?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if you've heard about the grant eligibility guidelines. Okay, we're going on to implementing the project. Of course, what you need to have is all the go by what you have on the application. It should state how you intend to implement the project. Have personal contact with the organization or the group that you are assisting. And communication is so important. It's important for every step along the way, whether it's between the club and one of us or those that you're helping. In financial management, make sure that you have someone that oversees what is going on, that the funds are being spent how they should. And the record keeping is very important. As I said before, make sure that you keep your receipts and log them as you go. Don't wait until the very end and try to get everything together and the project gets delayed because you don't have one thing or another. And make sure when you submit your form, I didn't mention before, if you're doing anything with another country, make sure that your funds are in American dollars. There's conversion tables available online. Make sure that it coordinates with the date that you actually expended the money. And try to follow the original plan as much as you possibly can. As David mentioned before, there's usually something that comes up. 1920, we had the COVID. No one could have anticipated that, and the far-reaching effect it has had on everyone and on deadlines. But hopefully, with this next year, we'll be able to stick more with deadlines rather than trying to finish everything up before we start the new projects for the current year. That's really, it's just, most of it is common sense. Make a plan, follow the plan. Make sure that you're meeting the goals that you've set for the project. And make sure that you have someone helping with your reporting requirements. I can't stress enough how important it is to keep those receipts. We need the invoices, we need the receipts, and we need the canceled checks. So if you keep them all together in the categories, I rely a lot on Excel spreadsheet. And I guess we may as well go right into the report itself. The progress report is due October 1st of next year. And of course, if you have it completed before then, that's fine. The earlier the better. The progress report, you can take a lot of the information directly from your application. It asks how much has been completed, what your project was, of course, and your Rotarian participation. As Rachel mentioned, it's so important to have as many people involved as possible. And as I said, what they have done to date, and what's the status of the project? Is there something that's going to delay it beyond what you've anticipated? And when you're filling out your application as well as your progress reports, make sure that your dates are consistent. The funding to date, what you've actually received, what the other partners have contributed, and then your expenses. And then when it gets to the final report, you can basically take the information from the progress report, except put it in terms that it has been completed and what additional things that you have done to complete the project. It's always good to know how many people that you're going to impact. If it's a whole community, you might want to get the demographics of the area to see how many people might be able to benefit from the project, and the long-term expected benefits of the project. If you have a cooperating agency, what was its role? Hopefully it will be more than just a financial role. Most of the schools have been very good about writing their letters and making their recommendations. So it's very, very important for the contact people to have good relations with the organization or the school that you're working with. And again, the funds have to match, the total income has to match the total expenses. And you do include what you're requesting from the district in that final income column. I know there's been a question about that on several occasions, but the totals have to match. And I'm a bookkeeper by nature, so I like to see it balanced to the penny. And again, certifying the signature has to be a written signature. And then you'll turn it in, and as soon as we get the funds and the report and it's approved, you'll get your funds reimbursed, half of the amount. And for those clubs that have the multiple clubs participating in the project, make sure that you do the proportionate share back to your participating clubs. Instead, I've gone through this very quickly. Again, everything is pretty much on the website. The forms that you need, the instructions, and we're always available. So Rachel, do you have anything else to add to that? I guess Rachel's not on right now.
Oh,
She's on mute.
Sorry, I
There she
forgot. I might add that when they do that midterm report, 90% of the time, something will happen that wasn't exactly like what you planned.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the really good time to let us know what you're experiencing and how you're going to make changes, so that you don't wait till the final report to say, oh, we weren't able to do what we said we were going to. So that would be really good time to think about that and include that in the report.
And you can evaluate at that time the progress report to see where you stand and whether or not you're going to be able to meet the deadlines. And for some reason, if the deadline cannot be met, we can always defer it to the following year.
I'd like to jump in here. One of the things that I noticed reading grants this last year and well, for the year before this one, and following along, is that the people who read the grants want your grant to be approved, and they will do everything they can to help you with that. And once you have your grant, we are flexible as much as we can be, so that if you, like they've said, we have changes. Things happen, COVID happens, all kinds of things happen. You just need to let us know and we'll figure out the adjusted timeline and make it work if at all possible. The other thing I wanted to mention on the multi-club grant, several of you seemed to be interested in that earlier. One of the things that's different on that application is that we are asking that an assistant governor also sign the application. If you've got clubs from more than one assistant governor, only one needs to do it. But part of the reason is we want somebody who is involved with all the clubs to understand what's going on and be available to help you. So I think that's a big point that you'll see if you look at that application. So now we've got another question block coming up. Who has questions on project implementation? We may have torn all 89 of you out.
I think that's a possibility, Debbie.
Any
Did
questions?
a great job
All
of
right.
explaining.
Here we go. So Becky is asking, for multi-club projects, the matching funds are sent to the lead club, or maybe she's answering a question, Becky. For multi-club projects, the matching funds are sent to the lead club, who then distributes them to the other clubs. If it's a question, let's answer that, David.
I do think that's an answer or something.
It wasn't a question, it was a statement that people they may not know that, because I didn't know it until I got into a multi-club project.
Got it. Got it.
Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry. I couldn't get off of, I was trying to fix my mute and unmute myself and I missed everything. Sorry.
That always happens. It always happens. Don't worry, David.
Okay.
And then we have a question from Greg Taylor of Lafayette. Can district grant funds be used to reimburse clubs for their own contribution to a project? David?
I would say no.
It can't be pass-through money,
No,
basically.
no.
So you have
And
a
it also can't be money for something you've already done. So if you were just getting it approved now, even if it was a good project, but you want to add all of the other features like the Rotarian involvement, if you had already done it, then you couldn't get it approved now to pay for it.
Doesn't meet the timeline.
Right.
All right. I'm not seeing any other questions. So Jim, oh, here we go. So some project participants won't be paid until the end or completion of the project, right? Greg, what happens is your club is responsible for paying all the expenses first, and then we reimburse you for the amount that we agreed to reimburse, as long as you spend as much money as you said you would. So you have to remember, you have to have the money to pay them and then we pay you the portion from the district grant. Anybody else want to add anything to that?
Just that no one gets any funds until it's has final approval.
Great. Okay, we have one more polling question and then I'll close. So Jim, if you could bring that up.
Okay, I gotta find it. Here we go. Launch. Okay, the poll is out there. Did the training begin your journey to a successful district grant?
And I realize it's really wordy, so I'm going to read number 1 to you. This is a teacher in me. Yes, I know what to do to qualify. I have the forms I need. I know about the approval process and what I need to do during and post grant in order to receive matching funds. I'm pumped and I'm ready to go. Number 2, yes, I understand the process and know what to do in general. The forms and contact info provided will help me with the details later. 3, which doesn't have a number, but it's the 3rd bullet, I'm starting to see the light. 4, still confused. And 5, why did I even bother to attend? So if you would make your choice and then submit.
We don't have very many confused people. Almost everybody's answered, and this is going okay. Now, maybe the confused people are trying to figure out how to find the submit button.
If you want to close, go ahead, Jim.
They're still coming in. Let's wait a few more seconds.
Okay. While they're coming in, we've got one last question from Kim Haynes. She'd like us to walk through an example using numbers. Kim, if you'll stay on just a couple of minutes, and anyone else who'd like to hear that, we can do that before we close the Zoom. So we'll get to that in case other people need to go ahead and go, but we will come back to that, and those who want to stay for that, please do.
Okay, I'm going to share the results. There they are.
Great. Gosh, 45% almost, or
option
1.
With 1
Yay.
close behind. For a training with a lot of people that were first timers, this is really pretty good.
That's fantastic. And I want to thank you all for attending. I hope you'll encourage other people in your club to join with us for the makeup sessions in, I believe it's October 17th. It will be live just the way this one is. So they'll have the opportunity to ask questions, listen, learn, just as you did today. You've been an absolutely amazing group. I never thought when we first planned this that we would worry about the 100-person limit attending a training session. So thank you again. Please stay, and thank you to all the panelists, all the people who participated. I appreciate all of you, and you stayed on target time-wise, and one of my goals always as a teacher is to respect people's time. So I think we did that well today. If you want to stay on for example discussions, please stay. If not, have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, and thank you again for attending.
Thank you.
Have a great weekend.
Great job.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, one thing I had wanted to say before everybody got off, y'all have been such a wonderful team to help us individually. And David, I'll especially thank you for all the help you've given me in the past. This is David Moore.
Well, you're nice to work with. I see you right there on the screen. You're nice to work with, David. So anytime, anytime.
Oh, well, yeah, really appreciate it. Look forward to trying again.
Me too.
Yeah.
Okay, so who had a question?
I did.
Well,
This is
I seem
Kim.
to go. Here we go.
Yeah, this
All
is
right,
Kim
go ahead.
from Maribel. Thank you for doing this, David. I appreciate it. For me, it helps to understand by walking through a simple example, and so that's what I asked for. And the example, let me start by saying, so my club decides we have a project that we want to do, and we have we're going to put $2,000 toward the project. And so then if it gets approved, I think I understand that the district will match that $2,000. So correct. So at that point, the budget for our project can be $4,000.
Correct.
Okay. Now, does that mean that we, the club, have to have $4,000 in our treasury in order to fund that through completion?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Now, when we assume we complete it correctly and appropriately, and we have all the right paperwork and all that, how much is the reimbursement at the end?
If you turn in your receipts and they cover $4,000, then we will reimburse you $2,000.
2,000. Okay.
So that's the grant funds. 2,000 are the grant funds, and then your club matched it. So you have a $4,000 project, and we would give you what you were approved for. Would be the club would be for $2,000.
Okay, that's really helpful. That helps me understand that our commitment is to have funds on hand for the entire project at the beginning, but know that we will be reimbursed, assuming we complete the project correctly, that we will reimburse for whatever the grant was, whether it was half or whatever it ended up being. Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that.
And those funds those grant funds are handled on the district. So the district has the money in their account, in our district grant account. Usually it's about a week or two turnaround time by the time we get signatures on the check, a couple of weeks.
That's not bad. That's not bad. That's
once
fast.
it's approved. Yeah.
Okay.
And Kim, another thing in your example, if you wrote the project for $4,000, but when you actually did it, you only spent, say, $3,600. Then you can still close the project and say, I finished it, only spent $3,600. You'll get reimbursed half of that. So instead of 2,000, you would get 1,800.
Right. Thank you, Jim, for clarifying that.
Okay, that's logical, but that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then Kim, this has been helpful. So then if the maximum grant anyone should write for district grant then is a $10,000 grant. Is that correct? Because your grant, you would get $5,000 from your club and then the district would be matching that $5,000? Is that the maximum?
That's a suggested maximum. If you had a larger project than that and you wanted to come in and talk to us a little bit about it, if we have the funds, the district funds, we would be glad to look at larger projects, but that's a suggestion, is $5,000, yes.
But is that for each club? If it's a multi-club?
Yes, it would be for each club, yes. So if you had a project that you had 3 clubs involved in, you could ask for a 15,000, or if we had the funds, if you had a larger project, we would be glad to look at it. Our goal is for every club in the district to have some access to the funds. And so after January, the first cutoff, if we have additional funds and you have a larger project, then we'll be glad to look at that and try to work with you on it.
When we did a multi-club project, y'all mentioned this a few minutes ago, while we had to be responsible for all of it, our partner club also gave us their money during the time of the project so that they shared in the funds.
The upfront funds, yeah.
Yeah, we put them together. We didn't do everything and then ask the other club to give us their money. They worked with us and we had their money as we were working on the project.
Right, and that's a good way of doing it. That way the league club's not footing the bill for the whole project up front.
So Jim, this is Rosa. So on that example that was given the $4,000 and you said it ended up coming in 38. Well, what if it came in at 4,500 instead? We updated the information. You would then reimburse the 2,250, correct?
Not necessarily. Depends on whether the funds were available. See, at that point, you're talking about most of the way through the year. And if we had some extra funds, we might be able to give it to you.
Ah, okay.
But if we didn't have extra funds, you would still have the 2,000 that you started with.
Got it. Okay. So you're guaranteed the 2, but not necessarily to make up the 500 that you went over. Okay.
Right.
Thanks.
Good question.
Yeah.
So then can you budget contingency funds into your first round of the grant so that if you do go over, it's there?
I don't think so, because that way what about if someone else needed the funds for a project? So we couldn't, I don't think we could do that. I would rather see you write something in the grant, Jim. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but maybe think a little bit high on your estimates or whatever. I don't know. I don't think we could put a contingency in, no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you might want to think about, if you went to global grants training, we talked about what kinds of things you want to do if something goes wrong. And so you might have a project where there are some parts you could leave off if you're running over and you can't get more funding, so that you don't have to worry about not being able to finish. But okay, so you didn't quite get all the landscaping done around the playground that you built or whatever, something like that, so you can make ends meet without running into trouble.
And also when you turn in your mid-year report, a lot of times that's a good place to say, look, we're going over budget right now. Are there any funds available? And by then we should start knowing if some of the projects that we approved up front are not going to happen. So, and that happens a lot. So if we have some extra funds and we could say that, if your project's going over, we could maybe fund a little bit more money, we'd be glad to look at that, because that's what the money's there for, is to use.
Also, something that I learned in doing one of the projects is we did a senior center project and we're putting a plaque on the building, say that this was done by these 2 Rotary clubs. It does not come out of matching funds. It has to come out of club funds.
Why?
Yeah.
That's what I was told.
No, now the Rotary Foundation has kind of a limit on what they'll spend on signage, but you can use grant funds for signage.
Okay, because my understanding was you couldn't, so that's clarified for me.
I think that's right, David. You can't put a Rotary sign on a project and pay for it out of grant funds. They'll have to do it out of club funds.
We did do it right.
But they could put a sign that said, for example, the Maryville Community Center, but not
Maryville Rotary.
Not provided by Farragut Rotary.
Right. The Rotary Foundation just doesn't want to pay for advertising for the clubs.
Yeah, I do remember one time we went through that with one of the Oak Ridge clubs that wanted to put up one of those great big entrance signs at one of the places coming into town. And And the ones where it has the Rotary Club meets here and Kiwanis meets here and all of that sort of stuff. And I think the answer was that we could build the frame for it, but not pay for the signs. You know, because it's a welcome to Oak Ridge thing, and that part of it's okay. But having a Rotary sign and saying Rotary meets on Tuesday at noon, that wasn't covered.
Well, I feel sorry for anybody who didn't stay on and listen to this, because this has been very helpful. In addition to the formal class, thank you so much for being willing to spend a few extra minutes to answer questions. I really appreciate it.
I was really excited to see that 29 people stayed on for this. So
Good.
thank you all. Any other questions for us before we close? I see lots of hands waving.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great job, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.